How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, great discussion we're going to have today. We're going to be talking about dealing with unruly inmates. My guest today is going to be Russ Hamilton. Now, guys, when we talk about dealing with unruly inmates, we're going to present the discussion before the handcuffs are placed on, before the need for use of force. These are just some other tactics you may be able to keep in mind that will help you de-escalate the situation if time permits. I know everyone says, oh, time is a tactic. Yeah, it's a tactic until it's not. The situation truly controls our efforts and what we can and can't do. And this dialogue that we're going to have with Russ is truly just different things that you can consider that may run all together progressively or may not even fit. Maybe it's so urgent that you really don't have the time to try any of these tactics. And at this point, it's more about getting your hands on that individual before they can harm themselves or others. Granted, guys, before we go into the show, have you guys gotten this book yet? Inmate Manipulation Decoded. Great book used for training all across the country. It's available on Amazon. If you guys get a chance, please check this out. Link to this book is in the description. We also have How to Succeed in Corrections, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison. This book is published by Blue 360 Media. It's got tons of advice on how to navigate a successful career in corrections, almost from any level. And it doesn't just have passages from me, but I also was able to get quotes from other professionals in the field. And this book, along with this book, Tips for New Correctional Officers and Their Supervisors, also available from Blue 360 Media. They kind of complement each other, but again, another book set on tips, passages, not just from myself, but from others. This, I would say, is not more on the tactical side, but still has some good strategy in here. And again, if you get all three of these books, man, you're well on your way to having a very good, successful career. I mean, these books are an effort to keep the core values of what we do in play. Last thing we want is to lose our core values. Let me get Russ. What up, Russ?
Hey there, Anthony. How's it going, sir?
Good. Hey, Russ, you mind introducing yourself to our audience, please?
Yeah, my name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I am also a former senior juvenile correctional officer, and I am currently working for a private company where we do reentry and rehabilitation work at a local county jail where I'm a case manager and for a probation department. I am also the founder of Keepers of Chaos, which is basically for any and all staff that work in corrections, not just the custody side. It's a rough and tough and tumble job. And I just try and provide, tips and history and guidance and mentoring and everything else possible to make it a little easier for all of us. And so does every single person inside that particular group, because that's what we're focused on.
Yes, and I love Keepers of Chaos, guys. There's just so much to learn. And guys, if you're interested in, you have like a topic idea, you could submit it through Keepers of Chaos and me and Russ get it, and we could possibly utilize it in a show. So there's just so many ways that you could help us make the show better as well as us giving you the insight. All right, so guys, this is a good topic, Russ. This is definitely something that we've covered before, but it's always a good chance to revisit and see if we can add anything new to it. Russ wanted to make it clear right at the very beginning that this is before efforts to use force is needed. So, Russ, do you want to maybe basically, before we go into the tips, any advice on when we need to stop trying to negotiate and really put our hands on the individual?
Yeah, so, that's really an experience issue right there. And, I have a lot of times, some officers that will, talk about what their particular institution, facility, department says that's required, and the stark realities that we're often confronted with. Make no mistake, everything that we do in corrections is backstopped by either the threat of the use of force or the use of force itself. And it has to be that way. Look at what our mission is. Our mission is to protect the public and not let anybody escape and not let anybody get killed. So on the other side of that, we don't want to be overly reliant on use of force all the time. And this is why We have to have, programs in place that, will help placate the inmates to a degree. We want good recreation. We want good medical for them. We want good food. We want them a chance to get education and in some cases, vocations. And that helps, tamp everything down. But at the end of the day, there are going to be times where we run out of what our options are. So in this case, what we're going to talk about, we're going to do the things that lead up to that. But sometimes even these efforts get truncated because a lot of times it's just not a good time to continue on because the situation is getting out of hand. It's escalating. More inmates are being attracted or hearing what's going on. There's a lot to take into consideration. And I just want people to be smart about the way they approach this, if possible.
Yeah, and I would like to add, when dealing with an unruly inmate, it's always good for the person on the scene who's taking the lead to try to see where the inmate is coming from see how they justify what it is that they're doing. I mean, a lot of times inmates may act out, but their justification, even though their actions are wrong, their justification may be correct. Like Russ said, you could have an inmate that just doesn't have the stuff he's supposed to have. And now, granted, I'm not minimizing what they're doing in their behaviors, but having said that, maybe if we lose this inmate, okay, well, the next one we got to be more on point with. Hey, guys, I heard Russ Hamilton was acting out because he didn't have his sheets or his hygiene. Okay, fine. Well, we didn't condone it. He's being charged and he's being, handled. But, hey, let's get on point. Let's do another round and make sure everybody's got what they're supposed to have. So I think being aware of their justification makes sense. But obviously there will be some whose justifications are just really too extreme, and we're not there to settle that concern. And I will mention that as well. If I have an issue with an inmate and their justifications are just so extreme, I'm going to tell them right off the bat that's not happening. I'm not going to go back and forth with you because I know ultimately I do have an end result, which I don't want to do, which is my use of force, which is getting this person now handled. If need be. But with that said, if I feel there are things that maybe we could do a little bit better, I'll work with them. But I always have my end result that if this person gets too tough to handle, I do have my team that's going to be able to come in and do what needs to be done to take control of the situation. But again, with that said, if it's something extreme that I feel we will not provide, nor have we ever provided, I'm not negotiating. At this point, if the person continues to be unruly, I'm going to go ahead and employ the next step, which will be, let's just move this person. Let's do what they got to do so we can keep normal operations. And guys, that's the basic premise here. When it comes to time as a tactic, remember the situation truly does matter. Time as a tactic works, but it works until it doesn't work. You got the pressures of keeping this facility moving. You got to keep the facility moving. So you can't just, automatically think that you're going to spend 3 hours on one inmate. It's not going to happen. It's going to be, yes, time is a tactic, but it's not that you're going into that with no end game. When I say time is a tactic, it's like, okay, we're going to spend a couple of minutes trying to do this. If this doesn't work, then at that point, we're going to go ahead and do this. Time as a tactic is not you have all the time in the world. It's giving you a bit of a game plan to say, I'm going to devote this much time on this. After that, I'm done. After that, I'm going to go ahead and move forward with the next step if need be. Because sometimes, Russ, unfortunately, maybe you could want to comment on this a little bit, but sometimes people have taken time as a tactic with no care for how long it's going to take. In corrections, that doesn't work. We have other responsibilities. And if you spend too much time on one, you're neglecting everything else that needs to be taken care of in that exact moment. Would you agree?
Yeah. And there's also this component where I see officers a lot of times that, it's all of a sudden like it becomes a stump speech for them. And they approach the individual in a way that's they go on and they keep up the endless talking and so forth. And that's not a good tactic. I tell everyone, wrap everything that you've got to say to the inmate up in less than 30 seconds, give them, and give them first, you give them an option and then you give them an ultimatum, And that's kind of generalized there. These are just, things to keep inside your head. I always give them an option. Then I always give them an ultimatum before we get to, that final, phase where this is not going well. But when you continue to just, drag it on and on and on, it's not just about the operations of everything else that's going on. It actually works the inmate up into a position where they're much more willing to take things to even further extremes rather than just a small little, a little bit of resistance. Now suddenly, they're grabbing a hold of something and trying to use it as a weapon or anything else. So there's a lot to this. You just have to be really smart in the way that you go from point A to whatever the final point is.
Yeah, and guys, I want to also mention with negotiation, guys, if you have negotiations going on too long, eventually one side will be forced to compromise or concede. And here's the thing, even if the inmate is correct, you got to be careful in how you resolve the matter based on that behavior. Because the inmate may be correct, but then when you go to resolve it, even if the inmate's correct, you could be rewarding negative behavior. So you still have to hold the inmate accountable, whether they're right or wrong, for the behavior that really took the situation out of control. So it's like, oh, well, the inmate was acting up, but he needed extra blankets, so I gave it to him. Yeah, but did you write him? Nah, because he did need the extra blankets. No, you still got to write him. Because at the end of the day, even though he should have had the blankets, we got to be careful that we wind up, rewarding the wrong behavior. So next time the inmate knows, I'm just going to do that again and get what I want. Or get what I need. We can't do that. So again, it's a fine balance. And I always tell people that if you're negotiating too long, it doesn't go in our favor. It just doesn't. So let's see. So again, this is if time allows. I mean, you got to take a lot of things into account here. This is not all inclusive. There's other, ways that people could address with unruly inmates, really based on their rapport with the individual. Because again, this is just a generalized strategy or some tips for a generalized strategy, but your inmates best. You probably have other ideas that relate specifically to that inmate that could work. But the first thought we had, and I think there's really no order to this. And as I mentioned, these could be applied, simultaneously almost, or progressively, or just independently, and it could work. I mean, it's really dependent on the situation. But I thought the first one we could do, Russ, is this one. Step back and remove yourself. Let someone else take over. Let me fix that because I don't know why I put let's. Let someone else take over. Again, no matter what attempt that you're trying to push forward, if for some reason you're the problem, and basically maybe you're the problem because maybe in an effort to go back and forth with this inmate, you're looking at it as a win-loss, basically.
Let's not say that you're the problem. Let's say that you're not the solution. All right?
We'll do it that way. Yeah, because go ahead, Russ. Go ahead.
I was going to say, because there's sometimes conflicts between people where someone else at that moment in time just may be the better right fit for that inmate to listen to. Maybe you already have too much emotional investment in resolving things. And this is the part where, this is all about, being a true professional, where you're willing to say, hey, Jones, I'm going to let you take lead on this. I can't get anywhere with this guy. And I think that we're just getting to the point, bumping heads. And sometimes just the fresh perspective, or the fact that, maybe Officer Jones here, maybe Officer Jones knows this inmate, or maybe he knows this particular unit better, or maybe he's a little bit more hip as to what the actual issue is. Because sometimes these guys, they'll trade it, they'll pretend it's one issue when it's really another. And we do this massive circle talking all the time. And sometimes if you're just there for overtime, you don't maybe understand, the little ins and outs of this particular unit. And then there's always the worst thing that could be involved, which is, prison or jail politics, which, if you're just there for the day and you haven't been in that unit for a while, you may not fully comprehend, or if you're new. So sometimes letting someone else take over, step aside, you become the backup instead of the point person for this particular going on.
Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. but I get what you're saying. But sometimes you are the problem. We have fire starters who honestly sometimes do rouse the inmates up for whatever reason. Maybe they're not used to having a position of authority like they do, and they wind up actually being the concern. And then what happens is that's when we have to kind of police each other and tell that person, hey, you got to step back, because right now I didn't have this issue before, and now you're coming into the unit, you're causing a bit of an uproar, so I need you to step back, and now I need to go de-escalate. And then what I would actually go as far as doing is talking to the person individually, or if need be, talking to the supervisor. So you're right, but I do think there's two different approaches. There is one where you may not be the solution, as you mentioned. You may not be the solution because you don't have a rapport with the inmate like that, or maybe you don't have that type of experience where you know how to negotiate at this point. You're relatively new, whatever the reason may be. But there's also a time where you could be the problem, where maybe it's me and Russ are having a dialogue, and Russ starts to explode, and then I start going back at Russ in an elevated manner because now it's personal or whatever it is. And now I'm not looking to solve the matter. I'm looking to win a disagreement. And at that point, that's not what we want to do. What we want to do is get in. It's not about win or losing, and resolve the matter. So I think there is two approaches there, Russ. I think one where you are maybe not the solution, but then there's another level where you are the problem, and now we have to take that person and remove them. And I think everybody here is very familiar with fire starters. I mean, we've had them come into our units, rouse shit up, and then leave, and now we're stuck with the mess afterwards. But the basic premise is definitely step back and remove yourself and let someone else take over. But would you agree with that, Russ, that you are? Sometimes we could have. I mean, we don't have to sugarcoat it, Russ. People trust us.
No. But when I look at the way situations tend to develop, I look at what's possible within the situation at the moment. If you try and take over from a fire starter, that could be an issue that crops up right then or later on. The other thing is if I come in as a supervisor, I'm not real keen on removing problems from my people. I want to have them get to solve them, and I want the inmates to feel as if they are always a better solution than when it ends up with me. So I would say, like in that, if I was the supervisor coming in, I would temporarily maybe take it away from the inmate, but I would want that inmate to be relieved when I hand it back to the other person. And hopefully by then they've composed themselves enough to be able to get in there. Because I don't want the inmate to feel like, hey, you know what? Next time I'm just going to shop for staff. And that's what I want to avoid. So I know I'm taking the complexity level up here a little bit, but it's worth thinking about if you're going to be, smart and tactical and strategic all at the same time when you're dealing with these situations.
Yeah, and I think I get what you're saying. So I actually think that if I'm a supervisor and I come in and I see that this person is only elevating the concern, there's a way for me to remove that person but still address the inmate's behavior. I just know at this point here, like you said, I could take this officer aside, speak to him speak to her or him in a few minutes, but really then focus on the inmate's behavior and basically kind of keep it off of this. But then when I'm able to get this person calm, I will go back to that officer and I will say, hey, listen, this is where you went wrong on this. That doesn't mean I'm doing it at that moment, and that doesn't mean that I'm promoting that when I'm trying to solve the matter, because at that point when I'm talking to the inmate, hey, got to calm down. At this point, I don't care what the issue is. You got to calm down, because there's no discussing anything until you calm down, because I'm addressing the behavior, not the justification at first. I'm addressing the fact that the person is acting crazy. So what do I want to do? Remove this person, even for their own safety. Remove the officer, put them where they got to go if that seems to be where the problem is. And then first thing off the bat is I'm addressing the behavior, not the reason. Once a person's able to calm down, then I'll go ahead and work with the reason. But if the person can't calm down and their behavior continues to elevate, then at this point, I'm sorry. I'm done. At this point, I'm trying. Whatever it is, now I'm going to go back to see if I need to get a hands-on approach. Because I'll tell the person multiple times, Russ, you got to calm down or we're not having this discussion. You got to calm down. or we're not having this discussion. I don't care of anything else right now, except that I'm going to de-escalate your behavior. If the person still acts up, I don't care what the reason is. They're being written up for whatever the charge will be, disobeying the direct orders, conduct on becoming, whatever it is, conduct which disrupts, I mean. All right, so that was a good one, Russ, because that covers actually an area that we didn't think. So when you're the problem and when you're not the solution. I like that one. That was good. All right. So then, Russ, you also added, I love this, and I didn't think about this right off the bat, and I was glad that you were able to bring this out. And again, guys, only if time permits. All this stuff matters or will work if time permits, but only during that situation how much time you really have on your hands, because, again, the situations are different for each facility. But give them a way out. What does that mean, Russ?
So one of the things that goes on in prisons and jails, that's one of our worst enemies, is internal inmate politics. And in those things, there are certain lines and things that can't be crossed or done without the inmate actually doing violence. And sometimes that's doing violence to an inmate. Sometimes that's doing violence to staff. And so when we go in there, and if we do issue an ultimatum, and there's a time and place for ultimatums, and in front of a bunch of inmates at the same time, giving them the wrong ultimatum can actually send them over the edge with those prison politics, where all of a sudden now it's on. And if you do this in certain places in California, you're not going to be fighting just one inmate. You're going to be fighting every single inmate that aligns with that inmate. So what we want to do is if you've ever heard the term about, saving face, what you want to do is you want to give them an option that makes them win and makes you win. And that's where, really, motivational interviewing type of skills come into play, where it can be a dual win situation, and just be able to give them a way that maybe they've painted themselves into a corner and they feel the only way out is to, take a punch at you. Well, no, we can often find a way around that, say, hey, we're going to come back to this later, and give them something in the meantime that's constructive, where they can wait for whatever you're going to do or something, right? It's hard to be very specific about it, but they have to be able to be in a position where they feel that you win, but you should also feel that you win. There should be some kind of, dialogue. There's some rapport being established, rather than just, drawing that line in the sand. And you know what? We're here now. Yeah. We want to avoid that if possible. Sometimes you're going to end up there no matter what. But this is just the right way to play it at that moment in time.
Yeah, I love that, Russ, because as I said, this we didn't say win-loss, we said win-win, which should be what we try to strive for, because that does basically help with situations. And I want to add on that with what Russ is saying. Also, remember, guys, you're making sure that the erratic behavior has been resolved before you even look for that win-win. You got to separate what you're trying to do from the behavior that's the real concern. I don't want to make it look like the person won as a result of their erratic behavior. I want to make it look like that once they calm down and we're able to talk it through, that we both understood where each party was coming from. And at that point, we met where we needed to be in the middle. And I love the win-win, because at this point, it's like, yes, you mentioned your concern. I was able to get your behavior down, and now we're able to really talk. But the end result is the win-win from the inmate's perspective cannot come from their erratic behavior or the perspective of their erratic behavior. It has to literally come from the fact that they were able to calm down. That's part of the effort. And then we're able to talk it out. And then we're able to find out that this is what needs to be done. And that is really a good win-win that you could also have generalized out, where, hey, guys, it wasn't the behavior that got me what I wanted. It was the fact that I calmed myself down and I was able then to speak the concern. Now, is this always a possibility? To be honest with you, this is really, as much as I would like to say this, as much as I would like to believe that this is really dependent on the skill or the rapport or the experience of the individual who is trying to get the person to do the right thing, I would have to say, really, it's dependent on the inmate's willingness to listen. Let's just put that out there first. I mean, yes, you have some people. Well, Russ, let me get. And then you have some people that do come in with skill, with the experience, and they're able to kind of navigate themselves through that inmate's behavior. But if the inmate is not willing to be open to that, it doesn't matter your skill, your experience. If the inmate's not open to that, then you're probably just going to have to resolve it by, hey, if you want to elevate it up with your behavior, then I'm going to go ahead and do what I got to do to solve the matter, which the matter now to be solved is I have an inmate that's acting unruly. I don't care what the justification is. I'm going to go ahead and look to solve that matter at that extreme level. I'm sorry, Russ, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say that's a point well taken. One thing that you should always be aware of is that, every inmate that you're going to talk to in there, and I mean every inmate, they are going to have that facet of their personality that's very much oriented toward the antisocial thing. And I mean antisocial in the clinical sense of the term. They are, they are counter opposed to what goes on in society as a whole. So they are the ones that they solve things with their fists. They are the ones that, that lash out verbally. They are the ones that make threats. These are things that we generally don't do. We happen to be pro-social type of individuals. We believe in law and order. So if your idea is that, well, I'm going to win them over with the way that I am, then you're just projecting there. You have to be very careful of that, because you will think that you are making progress in a situation where you're actually not. The other thing that I'll say about that is, if you can take a course in motivational interviewing and learn the skill sets to be able to do some of that back and forth, it's really good. It's equivalent to everything that everyone says about, verbal judo and this and that, which I'm not necessarily a big fan of, because I think it sets you up for failure, that you're not understanding where these inmates come from. These inmates are willing to take on a huge amount of risk for very little reward. Yeah, I'll get an extra blanket tonight when I end up in the hole after I sock you in the jaw. And their level of thinking is not what ours is. So be careful. If you're not cognizant of this, it's just because you haven't learned yet, and you will, and you may learn the hard way.
Yeah, I love that, Russ. And guys, this is really good advice here. No matter what end you're standing on in regards to how you're going to be utilized when dealing with an unruly inmate, whether you're the one dealing with them directly or whether you start to ask for help, what you're trying to solve is the situation. Yes, but if you have an inmate that's unruly and you reward their behavior, the problem is you're not going to do anything long term. You're going to just basically, unfortunately, open up a Pandora's box that you're not going to be able to handle. Is it a battle? Of course it's a battle. Because that's the one thing you don't want to give up, is the fact that the inmate's acting erratic. They know exactly what they're doing. They're just rounding things up. And you gotta, if the inmate's refusing to kind of work themselves down and they continue to stay up, then there is the battle there. But you cannot in any way feed or fuel that by giving them what they want, because in your effort to end the moment, you're going to cause chaos. Because a lot of people, Russ, and this is the problem, Russ, in my opinion, when dealing with an unruly inmate, is they look for a short term because they want to end the concern in the moment without realizing that your convenient effort to end it in the moment by giving the inmate what they wanted will now only entitle them or others to do this route again, because everybody else that's watching this inmate, all they see is the inmate screaming and yelling, and then you automatically in response giving them what they want. No, the inmates, if this is something that's actually done where it's in view of other inmates, because sometimes we don't have control of where the situations happen and where we can bring the inmate to try to resolve it. Sometimes we just have to resolve it in that area where they're acting a bit chaotic, which could be in front of other inmates. How you resolve it matters, because the other inmates are all watching you. And if they feel that could become a shortcut to getting something that they want or need, they're going to push the button. Would you agree with that, Russ?
Yeah, motivating them to do the wrong thing is always a bad idea. But this is what they've been steeped in their whole lives, and so you're not going to win in a situation like that because they're more committed to the outcome than you are. So there has to be a point there at which they suffer, some type of inconvenience. They suffer some type of loss, but at the same time, if we can push that suffering of their loss beyond to a resolution that actually helps them, that's good. But not when it comes at the cost of what their future behaviors are going to be, and that can be more than just that inmate in the future. It's other inmates, as Anthony just said. So be cognizant of what you're doing out there, because you're not fighting the battle at the moment for your win today. You're fighting that battle for all the future battles that you're going to have to fight, and you're going to have to fight them. And where are you going to start out? Are you always going to start out behind, and then have to press things in the future because all these people are watching? You guys, it's kind of a corny movie, but man, watch Ender's Game. Where that kid he gets asked, why he went so overboard in this battle, and the reason is because he knew that he was going to have to fight future battles, and so by winning this one battle, he had won all future battles, and so this is smart. This is the difference between being a strategist and a tactician. Right? We always want to be tactically sound, but if we employ good strategy, we won't have to end up at the tactical level as often.
Yeah, and I noticed too, when some people try to deal with unruly inmate, they try to solve both matters at the same time, what the issue is and their behavior, and you can't do that. You gotta get the behavior where it needs to be first before you're open to the suggestion of seeing what the concern may be. And I know some people that are being taught to negotiate, they use the silent voice and all this other stuff. But for me, if I can't get this inmate to cooperate with me right off the bat with the behavior, I'm not going to go back and forth. I'm not going to, oh, it's okay, and if you would just calm down. No, I'm going to be pretty. I know this may sound crazy, guys, but unless the person really is having a breakdown, and don't forget, guys, you have mental health with you. Mental health can tell you if this guy, is really going through something, or if they're just kind of showboating a little bit to some extent. So with that said, I go in with I'm not here to negotiate. Hey, you got a concern. You want to talk to me real quick and tell me what the concern is? You want to calm down? And if you don't, then I'm just going to go ahead and plan my efforts to move forward in a different approach. So I'm going to give you a few chances right now to try to think what you're doing right now. Try to think about everything that you're doing, and I'm going to give you a chance to work with me. But I am not going to sit there and try to resolve your issue while you're acting like this. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do both things at once. It's not going to happen, because then I can't separate the end result, because I want people to know that if by chance we were wrong and there was something that you were entitled to, or whatever it is, it didn't come because you were acting like an asshole. It came because you took time, you went, you negotiated with us, you basically, calmed yourself down a bit, and then we were able to move forward. And that's good for the inmates to see. What's not good is when you're going back and forth trying to resolve the matter, and all the inmates see is, hey, if you just get, like Russ said, hey, if you just give him a blanket, he'll stop doing this. Whoa, what are you doing? What are you doing? If you just give this inmate an extra meal, he said he'll stop acting out. Whoa, what are you doing? What are you doing? Stop. I won't even attempt to work with you until it's been clear from everyone else what it is that you had to do first, which was calm the hell down. If you're unable to calm the hell down, then I'm going to show you what my position of authority is able to do, which is basically I'll work on removing you from that situation professionally. I don't want people twisting that. And there is no more negotiation. At this point, even if you were right or wrong, your behaviors made you wrong. I thought that was spot on. And Russ, there was something that you said that I don't want to overlook. You said about being committed to the outcome. Did you say that the inmates may be more committed to the outcome than staff? Because that was good. I like that perspective.
Yeah, they start out with the position of whatever they perceive as their leverage at that moment, and then they just continue to amp it up until they get what they want. And there's no boundary there for a lot of these guys. I use the example. Hey, guy, he's only had one blanket and he deserves two, and so a way for him to get two is to sock you in the jaw, and he'll go to the hole. He doesn't care about the possibility of charges. He doesn't care about all those things are intangibles to him in the future because of what I said before about antisocial personalities and way out of risk profiles that would make no sense to us. We're risk averse. Inmates tend not to be risk averse, and that's one of the things that you've got to come to grips with. Especially if you want to put yourselves in a position of true empathy where you understand that mindset. They're dangerous people for those reasons. They will act out on whims, and so that's what you have to keep in mind when you're doing this, because we need to be committed to accountability for the inmate, accountability for ourselves, accountability for running a tight ship and a disciplined organization, so that all the inmates feel to a degree or another safer in that environment. If we're just giving things up, if we're capitulating all the time, if that's what our strategy is, to capitulate, then you're just going to lose all these battles, and people are going to be sitting there going, man, I just don't understand why we have so much violence. I don't understand why we can't seem to get these inmates to buy in to our little pipe dream from Norway, for instance. I mean it. These people. I mean, it's amateur hour right now inside California Department of Corrections, and they wonder why. So take note.
And Russ, I love what you're saying, because I want people to realize something. How we handle something opens up a Pandora's box. If I go to resolve a matter, I would like for it to be clearly seen based on the justification and not the behavior. So having said that, inmates will always look at the behavior, and they will believe that the matter was resolved because the inmate was able to act in this fashion. And even though we may not think that's how we resolved it, that's how the inmates see it. So if you don't present an effort to control the situation and not be controlled by it, and then basically when there's a chance for you to resolve the matter, did the inmate meet your standards first? Did the inmates go through A, B, C, D, and then calm the hell down, and then now it's worth it? But if you continue to fuel, it's not just so much for that situation, it's also for the other situations, because I'll guarantee you, even if the inmate is by themselves, they'll go ahead and tell someone when the issue is resolved, hey, just act like an ass, and they'll eventually give you what you want because they're more concerned about keeping the facility running. And that's another thing. Another thing. And Russ, maybe one more if we get to the next topic. One other thing. Inmates also know that the situation puts pressure on us. So they know in their mind it easier develops into a win if they can hold it as long as possible and act more persistently towards being an ass sometimes, because they know that we can't really keep doing this forever. They know that we have to get back to normal operations. So they assume that the more persistent they could be at this extreme behavior, the more we weaken. The more we're like, shit, man, I got to run stuff. What does he want? What does he want? What does he want? Mess is running late. I can't get meds out. What are they looking for? That's why when I think when the pressure of the situation, the time that is ticking minute by minute, the moment you're running out of time, you should not lean towards conceding with the inmate, but rather the measures that you can take to end it, not the measure that they can take to end it. So having said that, if we're down to our last couple of minutes, all of a sudden the win may look like it's going to go towards this person because I don't have enough time. What's the best way to end it? The best way to end it, get our team in right now, and we'll end it. Get our team in right now, and we'll go ahead and end it. But the last thing I want is to let the pressure of time wind up going into the favor of the inmate, because they know that. They know the longer they hold on to it, the longer it affects our operations. And now the whole facility winds up falling back on daily operations. Would you agree with that, Russ, with the pressure of time?
Yeah. So I always think about, the pressure of time is, I always think about the Grand Canyon, The Grand Canyon, what happened? Okay, over time, the river running through there just wore it down and ground away and eroded. And you'd think that stone is stronger than water. I always remember, man, when I was a kid, we had the Flintstones, and they went to the Grand Canyon, and it was this little tiny creek running across this flat plain. And they said, well, you know what? It's expected to be a big deal someday, and that's why we're here looking at it. So understand, that there's forces at play, and those forces at play, it's the long game that we want to be into. It's the battles that we don't have to fight day after day that we want to try and bring to our side. And don't let them grind you down. You should be grinding them down all of the time. This is why things like, being out there and being proactive matter, where I'm having conversations with inmate. I'm building, and everyone out there should know this. I hate saying it's even saying this, but building rapport only lasts until the point where you can't provide it anymore. Right. So it's not worth a lot of time and effort. The time and effort that we do spend being out there talking and being able to, establish lines of communication does have some merit, but you just can't believe that it's going to go your way because you've invested all this effort. That's not the way people with these types of personalities actually engage for the most part. It's not like building a friendship in the outside world. So I hope that made sense.
No, I think it does. I've had people come up to me and say, hey, do they see 1 and 2 the same? Like, do they see the behavior as a reason for why they're acting out? It's like, yeah, even if it is a reason, when you go to resolve it, other inmates will see that as a connection as well and wind up elevating their behavior. So you really do have to go in and separate the two. So like I have seen good negotiators, and it's funny that they're calling negotiators because they're really not. They really set the tone. They're not negotiating. They're just utilizing their authority at that point to say, this is what we're going to do, and then I'll listen to you. So when someone says, well, hey, I got a guy acting out, possible tear extraction, and someone says, well, what's he acting out for? Won't know, and or don't know and won't know until the person calms down. Plain and simple. I won't know what the real concern is until the person calms down. So I don't want my efforts to resolve be mixed in with the effort to respond to negative behavior. I just want to make sure that's clear. And the reason why that's clear is because if your effort to solve the matter gets entangled with your effort to respond to the behavior, that's the Pandora's box you don't want open. I'm sorry, It's the truth. That's the Pandora's box you don't want open. So I know a lot of people may sit in disagreement with this because they may want to go in and be seen as the hero that was able to calm the inmate down in that moment. But that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a strategist. I'm not looking for this person to get that individualized win because, hey, let's call Russ Hamilton. Russ Hamilton will solve it. No, Russ Hamilton is going to probably go in there and just, what do you need? Oh, he needs a blanket. Give him the blanket. No, guys, I think I want somebody in there for me. I know this may sound crazy. I want a good professional that still has the rapport because remember, there is still a trust here. I have seen inmates act out and then all of a sudden they know Russ. Russ goes in and Russ's presence calms them down. There's no, they know Russ is a man of his word. And the first thing Russ will say is, you're going to calm down? Yeah, man, I'll calm down. Okay, so once you calm down, we'll have this dialogue. But look at that, guys. The behavior was taken care of, and that's where Russ's rapport mattered. When Russ, to me, and guys, I have seen this. I got to mention this. I've seen this. I have inmates, when I worked at the female facility, I had inmates that would act out. And the moment you came on the scene, they would listen because you have an established rapport with them that they trust. But this established rapport is not influenced by negotiation. It's really just you're on the scene and they know what you're about. And at this point here, maybe they're trying to calm themselves down as well. And now I see Russ. I know Russ. Okay, fine. Hey, Russ, you know what, man? I've seen this happen. I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to act out. Blah, 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 blah. This is what I got. Okay, so breathe a little bit and then we'll revisit your concern. But I really truly believe that if you connect their behavior to the solving of the matter, it's a hell of a Pandora's box And Russ, that's why I also like to say one last thing. And I got to get your thoughts on this, but one last thing is that for those that may go in and think it's just convenient to do that, just like basically, I'm just going to end the situation by giving them what they want. I really do think I wish that they could be up on the administrative level to see how many times that now gets misused in so many ways towards other inmates. Because if you see the other inmates when they write their concerns, well, you gave it to such and such when they did this, or when they like the hunger strike protocols, all these efforts at extreme trying to resolve a matter, thinking that it's not about their voice being heard. It's about them thinking that they're automatically going to get the outcome they want if they commit to this behavior. This is not negotiation. If the person goes on a hunger strike, yeah, you may want to say, well, what's the hunger strike for? Oh, it's for that? Okay, well, they can't have that. So at that point there, I'm sorry, they'll be monitored. Everything else will be taken care of, but I'm not going to concede based on the hunger strike. I'm sorry. What's your thoughts?
Right.
There's a lot there, Russ. What were you going to say?
Yeah, there's a lot there, and I like to try and break things down to the simple. In the midst of these things, one of the things that inmates like this, I talk about their personality facets and so forth. Is that sometimes you have to point out the most simple things to them, and this is what they call developing discrepancy. So you want to develop discrepancy for the inmate, and you want to show him, okay, so you want to sit here and discuss your issue with the blanket with me while you're yelling and screaming and calling people names and claiming that you're thinking about going on a hunger strike over this. So what's my motivation for solving this then? And they're often not very good at thinking these things through. And so when you do that, when you develop that discrepancy for them and present it to them, it can be helpful. I'm not saying that it's going to cure the problem or solve it right then, but sometimes some of them will respond to that. And it's something I've used, a million times that has, borne fruit. So remember that, develop discrepancy for them because they often can't do it for themselves. They get so caught up in the emotional part of it that they forget often, what their objective is. And so now it becomes, about them, winning the emotional part of it. And if we can address that and develop that discrepancy for them, sometimes it will, tamp that emotional part of it, clear out of there. And you're in a much better position to have the win-win at that point, if that makes sense.
No, I think you're 100% correct, Russ. I do. And again, if an inmate is really fueled by their behavior, believing that the outcome of what they're going to get is going to be more related to their behavior than actually calming down and discussing it. Because sometimes you have people that come in that claim they have the rapport, and they wind up for the first 20 minutes negotiating their rapport. Oh, but I know you. This isn't you. I know you. No, the rapport is felt the moment you come on the scene. You come on the scene, and that inmate will recognize you, and you could start to, feel if it's going to go your way or not. Yeah, I thought this was good. Okay, so that was really good. This is one that we definitely have to talk about: reactionary versus established inmates that are unruly. The answer isn't always going to be writing them up. I know this may be counter to what a lot of people think, especially people that lean on policy and procedure and the rule book to really run things. And we'll get to that in the next one. But having said that, guys, sometimes this is really about developing expectations with you and that inmate to the point where you own the house and not them. If you're constantly reacting to the rules and constantly writing them up, well, the thing is you're basically running the house on their terms. But if you go in and you're established and you lead through expectation, they're abiding by your terms. You own the house. I always see a difference where if I have rookies, which is what I expect, by the way, from rookies. Rookies got to chase conflict. They got to get used to saying no. I expect them to writing up to set that template up, the foundation of where they're going to be in their career. Of course, they start off heavy, but you can't do that, as your senior. You got to really have some levels of expectations that are set across, because at the end, if you're chasing the rules, the problem is that they're running it. You're just totally in reactionary mode. And remember, guys, charges serve two things. One is to hold people accountable. That's one. Do I think it's the primary reason why you write a charge? To be honest with you, no. And this is going to sound a little unique, but hear me out. Yes, you do write a charge to hold people accountable, but a charge is also another way to document a concern that you know could be brought up later on, and you don't want to be seen as negligent. So there are certain charges, obviously, you write because you need the documentation of an effort handled, or handling a concern, an effort that was applied. So granted, let's say Russ gets into a fight with an inmate. Yes, my main focus right now of really writing that charge, I mean, yes, it's to hold Russ and the other inmate accountable, but it's really to document my effort that I saw the fight. I wrote it down, and things were handled accordingly. So I think the primary thing is really to document the effort along with the operations report and everything else. But with that said, the holding accountability, I think, is when we're actually, looking at a situation thinking, okay, well, maybe I can handle this through discretion. Me and Russ had a discussion about a guy. Let's say they have 6 pictures in their cell and they're only supposed to have 5. I may go up to the inmate and say, yo, you're supposed to have only 5 pictures. Why do you have 6? It's like, well, I just want to have 6, blah, blah, blah. Am I going to write the inmate up for that? Probably not. I'll be honest, I don't have time for that. Not with unruly inmates. Not that I want to lax on small things, but I also want to make sure that I'm strategic in what I'm looking at, because these are inmates that are known for breaking the rules. So I got to look at the bigger picture here. Now, if somebody came up to me later on and said, again, this is where the documented effort comes in and says, hey, I did a round and I noticed that Russ had 6 pictures in his cell and he's supposed to have 5. Did you know about that? Yeah. I just, at this point here, I know I had bigger fish to swallow, but granted, here's what we did. Later on that day, I came back. I spoke to Russ. I talked to him about the importance of, why you're only supposed to have 5, blah, blah, blah. And then we were able to figure it out. And basically, I was able to get that picture, working with Russ to get it sent home to his family. I mean, whatever. I'm using the picture as a scenario, but not everything has to go on paper. Now, if I was a rookie, but that's why rookies are really not meant to work in those more extreme restorative housing units, because rookies are in that reactionary mode. They are going to write every charge because they're setting their foundation. They're setting, a stand for what they're going to tolerate, what they're not going to tolerate. And you have to do it at the very beginning of your career, because that's what you branch off of. But having said that, that works great in generalized housing units where people have things to lose to some extent. That doesn't work great when no one has anything to lose. So therefore, that reactionary method doesn't work in there. It's more about the expectation of, what we've established between me and the senior officer. What's your thoughts on that, Russ? Reactionary versus established?
Yeah, there's a lot there to kind of break down and take in. I think that, being overly reliant on the paperwork side of things is not a good idea. There's always going to be some people that, for whatever reason, are going to be more reliant upon it. I think that, we don't want to overuse that tool. But I think that there's sometimes where, it clearly sets the tone. I mean, we can get to the end of, this conversation that we've had with this inmate, and he's finally seen the light, and we don't have to use any force on him. And we're going to go down there, and he is going to be issued what he's supposed to be given. He's seen the error of his ways, and now he's also going to receive that write-up, regardless. That just because he saw the error of his ways at this point, now he's going to read about it. So sometimes that's appropriate, and sometimes it may not be. It may be dependent on, how much time that you have. But I think that for an inmate to realize that, hey, once I start down this course, one outcome is going to be that I am going to get that piece of paper. I'm not necessarily going to, end up, being sprayed or handcuffed against my will, but there's a price to pay, and that's part of the accountability. Do I need to always run it that way? No. We can get to a place of understanding where if I'm satisfied that this is, run its course, do I have to write that paper? No. Just understand that whatever your choice is in that, it's going to have repercussions down the road one way or another. So, I'm all about that discretionary decision making. Have a reason behind what you're doing, and then figure out whether or not your reason holds up over time. Because you have to make adjustments to those things that you do in order to make sure that you're being, efficient and effective at the game. Because this is a huge game, and you have to make adjustments all the time.
Yeah, and I like what Russ said. Addressing doesn't always have to be writing a charge. It could be just we met an agreement with, what's expected of you, and then that truly does define how the inmate acts. And I love that, because that's not so much driven by the unit, but rather who's running the unit that day. It's not I'm in this unit, I'm going to act according. No, it's because Russ is in that unit today. And for people that that are placing officers in those areas, as I said, for the rookies, if I could just make a suggestion, if you're a rookie and you're placed in an RH or like restorative housing, a high level restrictive unit, and hopefully you're partnered with a senior cop, I think that's the day where you have to kind of sit and learn and really watch that senior cop maneuver. Because technically, for me, as I said at the very beginning, you want to be writing rules up. You want to be doing all that stuff. I get it. And that really works well in a general housing unit where, again, people have stuff that they can lose, but that doesn't fit well in a where they've already lost everything. You can't run a unit by taking away things they don't have. It doesn't work that way. I mean, be honest with you, that's really how we ultimately gain control, is we take away what they're used to. But having said that, when you're in those highly restrictive units, this is more about them earning it back. So it's a whole different approach. Like if I'm running a GP unit, I'm running a GP unit in an effort to maintain their lifestyle, right? So if they want to be stupid, I'm going to take things away. When they don't have anything to take away, and now they're in that restorative housing area, the dynamic changes to them earning things back. It's not so much more about us taking things away, but rather them holding it back. So, or rather them getting it back. So now it's more of a delayed. It's like, okay, hey, you messed up yesterday. I'm sorry. You're supposed to get your TV today. You're not going to get it. It's basically maintaining the initiative. But for me, I believe those efforts are usually with an expectation between the officer and the inmates in that unit. Like, I always tell people, if an inmate writes to me and says, hey, my TV was taken away by such and such, especially in these restorative housing units, I want it back. I'll go back and say, well, take it up with your officer or your area supervisor. Because at that point there, that unit is managed by maintaining the loss of privilege, not initiating the loss of privilege. So with a rookie, obviously, you're writing people up in those regular housing units, you're taking things away. That helps you maintain your authority. But that's not something that lasts forever. That's just something to kind of get you established, and eventually they see what you're about, and they know you could take things away, and they know you're willing to take things away. So that's great when you're starting off in those GP units. But when you get to the restorative housing units, it's different. It's about maintaining what's already being done, because the inmates will try to get around that. They'll try ways to get what they want. Now you have to maintain what's been set forward already. So like if Russ believes that the person's behavior has been better, then yes, you know what? I'm going to give you the TV, but probably not your first effort at asking. I can't make it that easy either. It's going to be maybe, okay, you know what? Give me a week. Let me see how you're doing and ask me in a week. It's not going to be instantaneous. But again, these are things where I think a rookie officer needs to observe that you really can't expect them to know how to work an RHU unit, because there's a finesse when it comes to inmates having to earn stuff back. And again, that's more the restorative housing side. But when it comes to the reactionary side inside of a GP, yes, they got these things already, and you could take stuff away. That's a great way to kind of get yourself used to conflict, get yourself used to saying no, and setting that foundation. But when you're on the other side, this is more about you maintaining it. And I think that's where you need the good senior staff, because when it comes to maintaining it, that's not so much on active rule enforcement, but rather it's more discretionary in how you see in the long term what's the best way or more strategic way to give this person something back. Would you agree with that, Russ? Is there a lot there, or?
Yeah, it's one of those things that you have to have, an intentionality about it. You have to have some strategies. You have to have some tactics, and you have to try and think about how those strategies and tactics overall are affecting what you're doing, right? And there may be times where you realize, hey, this isn't working after all. I thought I had a good game plan. I thought I understood how they were going to react, and instead you have to find something else. And that's where I talk about, changing up the game plan. Don't just stick with something and it's not working. Try and find the things that do work. And there's a lot to it, but that's part of the whole, thing about, reasoning things out and trying to, gain a sense of empathy with inmates, because they are not the same as the people that you associate with in the outside world. They're just not. And so if you gain true empathy, which is, just their perspective and understanding what motivates them, you'll be so much further ahead in the game, because, understanding, what's going on in the head of an addict inmate is different from, maybe what's going on in the head of a shot collar gang member out there. And understand that there's also, the interactions that different factions out there have affect all of the politics that go on there. So this is a thinking man's game. It's not there's no one way to do things.
Yeah, as I said, guys, there's times where taking things away will work, and then there's time where it won't work, and that's where the experienced professional needs to be able to come in and kind of navigate other alternatives. Because again, when you're working in a unit that they don't have much, your authority has definitely lessened in your ability of what you can do. So now that's where it becomes more of an expectation, an exchanged agreement. While we're on that, we got two more left. Might as well cross this one in. Don't overuse your authority, and don't hide behind your authority. I know there's a lot of people that why did I erase that? So basically, I know there's a lot of people that really lean on policy and procedure to navigate their decision making. One, maybe because they figure there's less liability if they can, quote policy and procedure. And I guess that really makes sense if you're really going to make everything into a charge. But if you're not going to make everything into a charge, which you really shouldn't be anyway, I mean, you still got to try to manage the unit. So you're going to realize you are going to have behavior that just doesn't fit well, and how you're going to deal with it. I don't want to always see everything written on paper. I want to see you out there and mitigating some of the concerns that could be mitigated before they're written up. But with that said, when it comes to don't overusing your authority, the inmates, we talked about something where I wrote in the book I have coming up. Establishing your authority is pretty much what the facility gives you already, right? Inmates come in, they're in a prison or a jail. They know exactly that you have authority over them, whether they believe it or not. But the point is, they know that's the role, and for the most part, accept that. But when it comes to the maintaining, that's usually through, as me and Russ talked about, the individualized efforts. There's so much that comes into the maintaining of it all, because that's technically what you're doing. The authority is already established. There's all policies and procedures and everything that establish the fact that you have authority. It's there. Your job is to maintain it. So now if you keep on going back and, well, I'm the officer, or this is what I say, or blah, 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 whatever it is, that's not how you're going to maintain it, because that's what they already know. How you maintain it is through your interactions with them every day, and basically, letting them understand what it is that you expect, and then what it is that they should expect from you. But overutilizing your authority, to me, also starts to weaken, because if you have officers that yell all the time thinking that's the best way to use their authority, they wind up getting laughed at. I have seen quiet officers who truly have that relationship with the inmates, where the inmates know their place. But when they yell, if they ever do yell, everybody shuts up and they listen, because it's not something that's done frequently. Where I've had officers that believe that they could just go in and bark orders, and then when they're upset, people just ignore it because it's just another day with Officer Hamilton. So I think the more you overuse your authority, actually, the more it weakens in regards to the frequent use, especially if it's being misused too. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
So yeah, when we're starting into an engagement with an inmate, we want to be at that level as if it's just back and forth, give and take. I'm not saying negotiate, but the inmate is telling us something, we're telling the inmate something back. If we start out immediately and officiously, hey, you know what? See that badge? I'm the officer, you're the inmate. You're going to do what I tell you to do. There's nowhere for us to go in this conversation, right? And once again, I'm not saying that we should negotiate with them, but what I am saying is that this conversation is going to have a course, and this course is going to go from, when it initiates all the way into where it concludes. Now, it may conclude with the use of force. That may be actually, we don't know at the start. That may be actually the only option we don't have. But if we don't have somewhere to go in that conversation, then it's always going to sound to them as if that is our only reliance, is the fact that I have that badge, I have the authority, I have the decision-making capability, and suddenly we're at that stalemate. And then there's no way for them to determine, hey, guess what? This conversation just took a turn because we were here talking about, possibly being able to figure out what the actual problem was, and the inmate was, going to come off of his stupid behavior and now all of a sudden, the inmate isn't doing any of those things, but we changed the tone because now it's a necessity. Now we're on the verge of having to use force. And now, does it mean anything more to the inmate when I tell them, turn around, place your hands behind your back, do it now, or get down on the floor, do it now? Or has this been the same tone all along? When that tone changes, there's more of an impetus for them to take some of those commands. Once again, this is hopefully coming up short of actually using force. Hopefully this is the point where they comply. But now that you've been able to change that tone, now where you have actually gone through some of the changes, maybe they're a little more likely to hear and realize that they're in danger. But if we started off heavy, we have nowhere to go but to stay heavy. So be cognizant of that. I've had, tens of hundreds of thousands of conversations that I've both done well and poorly at. And I've always learned more from the ones that I did poorly at in order to try and adjust and adapt. So if you're over reliant on the badge and the authority, you're going to end up at that ultimate stage of having to use force more often, which I'm just saying that, be a complete officer, find balance.
Yeah, and I love that, Russ. I mean, you can't operate on that extreme all the time anyway. I mean, now you're going to do this for 25 years. And then this last one to me is isolate them from any counter influence. This is part of where the situation matters. If I got an inmate and I'm looking at them and they're, let's say, acting wild on a tier, and I'm trying to negotiate with them when all their peers are around them supporting them, I'm going to be very limited in my efforts to negotiate. I just feel it's going to be wasted energy because at this point here, their influence of their peers is going to weigh heavily or more heavier than my influence. If I'm not able to get the inmate into an area where we could have this one-on-one, where I could have influence, because that's what we're really trying to do. When you have an inmate that has that's acting unruly, you're trying to influence them. That's the key. I want people to know that you're trying to influence the inmate, whether, as I mentioned, it's direct. Hey, Russ, I'm not going to listen to you. Calm down, man. You know me. I'm going to listen to you, but I'm not going to listen to you until you calm down. And again, that's influence. But I can't do that in the middle of a unit with inmates yelling for the other inmate to act like an ass and commit to whatever it is. And clapping because the inmate feels that they're justified in what they're doing. So at this point here, if I go to negotiate with Russ and I look at Russ and he's up there on the tier and there's 20 other inmates cheering him on, I'm going to say, hey, guys, I'm not really too committed to this effort to negotiate and de-escalate at this point because I can't even get my message out to Russ on the tier. So having said that, I'm just going to be wasting time. So at this point here, what I would tend to do is really cross into starting to giving the inmate the directions and see if they comply or they don't comply. And you give them that one chance. Hey, my man, lock in. Nah, fuck you. I'm going to give you a chance here. Lock in. Nah, once that door closes, it's done. Lock in. Nah, okay, close the door. Door closes. Yeah, man, it's done. Now, once the door is closed, there's no more negotiation. It's done. That's what it is. Oh, now they're able to comply. Nope. Once the door is closed, they got to know, and that's more of a message for everyone else as well, that we're not negotiating anymore. You were given your chance. Now the inmate goes, well, I want to go back in. It's too late. The door's shut. The door is shut. But having said that, people don't realize that they're also, when they go to negotiate, they're not just negotiating influence with the one person that's there, but that's causing the problem, but everyone else that's supporting it. I don't have the energy to negotiate with 20, 30 people on a wing. All I have is my effort to talk to Russ. If I can't isolate Russ, if I can't gain influence with Russ, I'm going to be very quick. It's going to be very directional. Hey, Russ, are you going to lock in? No. This is what's going to happen if you don't lock in. A, B, C, D. I'm going to ask you one more time. Are you going to lock in? No. Lock the tier. All right, guys, let's go ahead and see if we could start moving this forward. I don't want to put energy towards a situation that we can't gain proper influence. And if I can't control that part of the environment into which I can isolate the inmate from counter influence, I'm not going to keep putting my energy towards it. Because and let me tell you why I think this works, Russ, and I know I'm correct. And this is, some people may believe that the successful outcome is negotiating the inmate down. That's not the successful outcome. The successful outcome is to get what you need done. That's what the successful outcome is. So I'm not going to be overly invested in a part of that route if it's not getting me there. And I really do think when you have to make an effort where there's too many people there and you really can't create the influence, you're wasting your time. It's just wasted time. It's just not enough. And the reason why I know this is the case is I have seen inmates where if you watch on video, the officer is successful at a second of negotiating. You can see the inmates thinking about it. Then they go off to maybe a little bit off to the side and someone telling them, yeah, you're a coward, man. You better not settle. And the inmate comes back with a different demeanor. You know, here we are. I'm talking to Russ. I think I got Russ going well. The inmate takes a second to think about it, comes back, and he says, nah, fuck that, I ain't going. Let me tell you something. That shift in mindset does not come because the inmate doesn't want to resolve it. It's coming because they're being pressured. And at that point there, no matter what happens, you are not going to be able to negotiate with that inmate. And the reason why is because now their survival in their mind is being questioned. You know, it's like, well, if I don't do this, how do I look? Because that's also a vanity thing as well. So that's their long term versus your short term. That's what it is. And at that point there, if you're looking to still negotiate, they're winning the long term. You got to realize the long term there is that they need to save face because this wasn't done. Now, granted, they're surrounded by counter influence, but granted, if you take the inmate aside and they're by themselves, you're able to manipulate a little more, able to counter influence them a bit better. But you're never going to be able to do it in the middle of an active unit where their peers are voting against you. What's your thoughts on all that, Russ? Because I don't think a lot of people look at that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's something I always would take under advisement. I'm always be aware of, making sure that the ground that this is happening on is to your advantage. Get that inmate out of that area or get people locked up. You might have to, and this may not be possible. Inmate may just say, I ain't going anywhere, And so then maybe we start, getting some more people on site. Maybe we start, backing up things. I've seen, these things, end up in riots before. And so we start having to take proactive measures. It's not where we want things to go, but at that point, the inmate is determining that it's going to go that it's going to go that way. But that's another reason for trying to start to get ahead of the situation early. We shouldn't be on step 3, 4, and 5 and be going, oops, you know what? I should have tried to make sure that we were out of range, out of earshot, out of influence at this late stage in the game. That is the ground that you want to make sure that you're on from the very beginning, if at all possible.
No, Russ, you're spot on. I think that what we learned, one of the things that we learned today is that even when an inmate is acting unruly, your first attempts should still be to direct the behavior before you look to resolve. Because again, if you connect the behavior to the resolution, that's going to open up the Pandora's box where you have to direct the behavior, get them to calm down, and then once they're calmed down, then you could work on the effort to resolve. And I think that's the big part of the generalized area that we covered here, is that you can't look to deal. You're not looking to deal with the inmate's behavior. You're looking to direct that and then resolve the matter. If the inmate is choosing to continue to act erratically, then I'm sorry. The next measure is, hey, I'm going to go ahead and we may have to use force on this guy. And again, it's really more for the long term. When you're out on the streets, just in case maybe someone may see this differently, and let's say you have a situation that is sort of similar where you have to negotiate. It may only be a one-time occurrence, and you're not surrounded with a bunch of people who are looking to do that same thing to, go ahead and manipulate what they want. But for us, we have to always worry about, how we solve a matter, how it could be misused by others. So if we make an effort to concede right away and people believe that we're conceding to the behavior, well, that's a problem, because then they'll go ahead and commit to those same behaviors because they're going to hope for us to concede. And then we're like, well, you did it for such and such. It's like, hey, guys, you should have been very wary with that, because now I have 20 inmates on a tier acting crazy, and that's because we helped this one, because you were so wanted to be the victor, wanted to be the hero for this one incident. And now we can't run a unit right now because we did not, in our efforts to resolve the matter. Here's up. Russ, before we go into closing, I think this is something that we could probably have a whole show on. So just to keep in the back of our mind, all because you resolved the matter doesn't mean you controlled the effort. If you're going to resolve the matter, you better make sure you've controlled the effort that gets to that resolution. That's a nice short in itself. Hey, Russ, you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
This is one of those things again. This is definitely, way beyond Corrections 101. This is something that, takes time and effort to develop. It takes experience. It takes putting yourself into difficult and uncomfortable situations over and over and over again. And so don't shirk from those things where the situations are uncomfortable. Become comfortable in them. I'm not saying be complacent, but be aware that the more discomfort you experience, the better chances are that you're going to be conditioned to being able to think through and come to a good outcome, maybe even an optimal outcome, although I don't believe there's necessarily such a thing as that in corrections. But just understand that you're going to get better and better at doing these things, and that's why I say, man, my hand was always up. I'll go do it. I'll go do that. We got a bunch of, drunk inmates in there. I'll go do that. Put yourself in that position to be uncomfortable. And that's my 2 cents worth.
No. It's spot on. And guys, the reason why I wanted to have this dialogue is because I know this is something we deal with on an everyday basis. We are going to deal with unruly inmates, and everybody believes that there's different ways to handle them. And you got a soft approach, you got a hard approach, and then somewhere along the line is the right approach. It really is situation driven. I mean, everything that we gave you here was not a catch-all. Is you really got to look at the situation and see what truly works. Because there could be times we told you this and it's outright wrong. It just doesn't work. But the key of this dialogue is this. No matter what tip you take here, the ultimate control we have over the situation is always going to be the hands-on. That's always in the back of our mind. I think sometimes when we look to resolve a matter, we look at as the primary is to de-escalate, and that's the end result. And then we wind up getting so focused in the de-escalation part of it all that we forget that the end result really is to get that inmate where they need to be. This is all just basically a courtesy for the inmate, to be honest with you. I'm not being rude, just to be honest with you, it's a courtesy for the inmate. Sometimes we get so involved in wanting to give that courtesy that we wind up just, I don't know, trying it when it should no longer apply. You know, it's like, well, no, guys, that's not the effort. This was a courtesy for the inmate. If they don't want to comply, then I'm going to go ahead and do this route. So I want just people to be mindful that these are efforts that, yes, we should try to attempt if we can, if reasonable. But if you can't, the back of your mind should always have that we automatically have the best resource to end it. It's right there. We're just going to make an effort beforehand, but it's right there. Don't try to continue to do the de-escalation technique because you think the end game is to de-escalate and get a compliant inmate. It's not the end game. The end game is to get your order completed. That's what the end game is. And if the inmate at one point doesn't choose to comply, well, the courtesy's done. The courtesy's done. I got a prison to run. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.